Hey everybody, welcome back to Out of the Ordinary with Jay, and back by popular demand, I've got Phil. And Phil, just to put everything in context, because I like to give people some context, how old are you?
61.
61, and where are you from?
New York originally, but I spent most of the first 30 years of my life in New York, then bounced around for a few years, and then for 26 years I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay, and what did you do?
And then I retired a year and a half ago and moved out here.
Okay, so you're retired now. What did you do before that?
I worked as an engineer for a couple of years. My background is in physics and astronomy. So I worked as an engineer for a couple of years back in New York, but I decided I really wanted a career in education. So when I was in Albuquerque, I worked at a community college, Central New Mexico Community College, and I taught physics and astronomy there for 13 and a half years. Then I moved into administration. I became an associate dean.
Okay, so physics and astronomy, something everybody can relate to, in that we all live in the physical world and we all look up at the stars sometimes.
There you go.
So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic that I've been wanting to dive into for a long time, and you were gracious enough to want to go along with it, so I appreciate that. And I'm actually going to use sort of something that you gave me. We're going to talk about life's purpose, and you had mentioned, about finding meaning in one's life or having a purpose. It goes a long way to making life more engaging and interesting. You said,
and entertaining.
Yes, and entertaining. And you said, I think a lot of people struggle with this. It's my feeling that people who do not have some sort of purpose in life, whether it's achieving a goal or raising children, etc., are more prone to bouts of depression and less satisfied with their lives than those who have found meaning in their lives. And we'll start with that as a premise. So I guess, do you believe life has an inherent meaning, or is it something that we create for ourselves, or what are your thoughts? Just generally.
Personally, I think we create meaning for ourselves. In fact, I don't know how it came up, but one time at the gym, someone I know at the gym mentioned the meaning of life. And I said, well, once I have it figured out, I'll let you know. And by the end of my workout, I said, okay, I thought of something.
Curls.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I look at it is the meaning in one's life is the meaning one ascribes to it. In other words, you have to find purpose and meaning in your own life. Now, that's going to mean different things for different people. But I think for the vast majority of people, you can probably summarize the meaning of a person's life or their purpose in life as follows. Basically, the way I look at it is that one purpose in life is to make the world a better place for yourself and for future generations. Yeah. So to make the world a better place. And that's a good one. Another meaning or purpose in life is to help people. Helping people helps us feel good. We feel good when we help other people.
That's true, and another good one. I like it.
I think just about anything else you can think of as far as what gives your life meaning falls into one of those two very broad categories. Yeah. You do something because you think it's going to result in the greater good going down the road, whether that's for yourself or, and usually if it's good for you, it's good for other people. That's why I say for future generations. If you have children, then obviously a big focus in your life is going to be your children and their health and happiness going forward. You want to make the world a better place for your kids.
Yeah, and if you do something nice for other people, it makes you feel good, of course. So there's that, you're getting that out of it. For sure.
If you help other people, you're making the world a better place, right? So, and then another way to find purpose or meaning in your life, which is, I still think related to the other two, is to take advantage of the opportunity that we have. Just the fact that we are alive, we have this wonderful opportunity to experience life. And I think another part of the purpose or meaning to our lives is striving to realize our potential. We all possess tremendous potential. And we have this opportunity, this life of ours, so why not make the most of it and see what you can accomplish? And
I like that.
So
I think that's great.
That's how I view meaning.
I like that, and I wanted to kind of use that. You said somewhere in there, you said it's really you apply the meaning. You said early on, something to the effect of, and it made me think of sort of a lot of the Eastern cultures. There's that sort of life is meaningless until you apply the meaning sort of thing. So you're kind of in that realm, I think, there. What I didn't hear in your explanation was like religion or believing in God, like that being a purpose. And I think a lot of people might say that. What do you think about that whole thing?
Well, I don't think that people who are religious have a monopoly on meaning. I'm familiar with...
So does that mean you're not religious?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
not at all. I was raised Roman Catholic, but essentially lost any belief in supernatural by the time I was 12, or definitely by the time I was 13 years old.
Okay.
But probably around 11, 12, I started to question it, and maybe by the time I was 12, I had dismissed it completely.
Well, I know a lot of changes happen around mid-school, junior high, but that's a big one.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So,
but I don't think that people who are religious have a monopoly on meaning, and you'll hear a lot of religious people and Christian apologists say that without God, life has no meaning. And I don't believe that. For example, I like to watch a lot of YouTube debates between Christian apologists and atheists. So, for instance, one apologist that you see a lot online is William Lane Craig.
Okay.
And he always says that if there is no God, then life is meaningless, because that means that our lives are temporary. You know, we're mortal. We're going to live for only a certain amount of time, and then we're going to die. And if this is all there is, then it's all for nothing, because we're going to end up dead, and it won't, whether we existed or not, it doesn't matter. So he said that without immortality, without an afterlife, without a God and without an afterlife and eternal life, then our existence is meaninless.
Gosh, I would think that could make it more meaningful, not less.
Yeah, exactly. I have the opposite opinion, is that if life is short and temporary, then you appreciate it more.
You got to eke every hour out of the thing, right? Yeah.
And what really confuses me about that particular argument is, okay, so let's say that God does, and when I say God, okay, I'm going to specify this because in an earlier interview we had, the Going to Hell interview.
Oh yeah.
One of the comments was, "What God are you talking about?" You know, and that's a very good question. So I want to address that. When I speak of God, I'm speaking of the Judeo-Christian God. Okay. And you know, as I said, I was raised Roman Catholic. So when I speak of God, I'm talking about the God of the Bible.
Right. We're filming this in the United States, where Christian theology is the leading religion, and so that is what you're going with. Okay, got it. Right. Okay.
So if there is a God, and when this life is over, when our physical existence ends, then either we end up in heaven or hell, depending on the criteria set forth. Yeah. So even if we make it to heaven, then I want to know, okay, what am I going to be doing in heaven that is going to be so meaningful? You know, what is God's purpose? You know, if we don't have any, if God doesn't exist, and the physical world is all that does exist, and therefore our existence is meaningless, then what's the grand purpose of God? Apparently, God has a grand divine plan. I'd like to know what that grand divine plan is. And when I drop dead, if I am fortunate enough to go to heaven in the afterlife, then what am I going to be doing? Am I going to be working on God's grand projects? Is he going to give me assignments?
So the way I would argue that, or the way that I might understand that, would be, you know, the plan is not for you to know, or even if it was revealed to you, you couldn't understand it. And maybe part of the plan is for you to not to know, because if you knew the plan, you might act differently. I think that might be some of the arguments you might hear to that, you know, to that thought.
I'm simply saying.
But you're saying I still want to know. I think a lot of people fall into that category.
I'm curious to know, because if you know, reading the Bible, you know about the physical universe that was supposedly created by God, and heaven and hell. So that's the heavenly realm, I guess. I don't know what you would call hell. It's a spiritual realm, let's say. I don't know. But at any rate, there's no inkling that anything else exists. So I would imagine that whatever God's grand plan is, it has something to do with the heavenly realm or this physical realm. And if it has anything to do with the physical realm here, then if this is part of God's grand scheme of things, then how are our lives here meaningless? Because the idea is we shouldn't be.
Right. In other words, you're using his own argument against him in terms of the guy. I get you.
The argument is even if God does exist, you read this in scriptures all the time. We shouldn't be so concerned about worldly concerns and needs. We should be planning for the afterlife. We should be more concerned about.
But can't those two coexist?
But from what it seems to me, it gives the impression that our lives here are essentially meaningless.
Well, that's what that one person said explicitly. I think you said that in his.
Meaning
William Lane
Craig said it would be meaningless,
right?
If God did not exist and there were no afterlife and our lives were temporary.
Okay, so can I ask you then how, if you're not religious now, how do you find meaning or purpose in your life? Like, how do you?
Oh, well, as I already said, basically trying to make the world a better place.
Okay, so that's
and the way I did that, I don't have a family, so I've never been married, never had kids.
Another big place that people derive meaning from.
Course.
So you're neither spiritual or a family guy, and yet you found meaning. So that would defeat his argument, at least for you, because you found meaning without any of those things.
True.
Right?
Well,
so you've already
I have
won the
other
argument.
family. I don't have an immediate family.
No, I know what you mean.
Right.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay. But the way I approached it, for me to make the world a better place, is I went into education. I felt that was one way I could help make the world a better place. I'm a firm believer in education being one of the most important functions of our society, to educate people so they can make better decisions in their lives. And I have this Star Trek mentality of the future, and I want to see humans continue to progress and learn more about the world around us, the universe in which we live. And my contribution was teaching.
Right. And by the way, just to credit your way of thinking on this, when people talk about, oh, you should get a career that's meaningful or whatever, one of the top of the list is usually an educator.
Right.
So in that regard, I think most people would agree with you that you've had a meaningful, life or a meaningful impact. So anyways,
I tried.
How does your sense of purpose influence like your day-to-day choices, would you say then? Like, do you have any sort of, given the way that you think about life's purpose?
Okay, so as I said, to make the world a better place, so I try to be very environmentally conscious.
Okay.
I'm a minimalist. I try not to, purchasing things is great for the economy, so I'm terrible for the economy. I buy things that I really need or really, really want.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is the less waste I generate, and the less energy I consume, while still leading a normal, productive life, the better it's going to be for the environment, and the better it's going to be for future generations.
Sounds like, I'm looking at you now. You look like you're, dressed normal and everything. So imagine that, you'd say it seems more, you're not showing up in like rags or anything. So, so.
I wear clothes until
so it sounds like you just prefer to not be wasteful.
Yeah, don't be. Yeah, so I'm making decisions that I think are going to have I'm trying to avoid making decisions I think will have a negative impact on the environment. That's part of the reason that I'm, as you know, my diet is primarily vegetarian. I eat some fish, and I really do that primarily because I went completely vegan for a while, and I did not feel good. I was losing a lot of weight, and I discovered I need a little bit, not very much, but a little bit of animal protein in my diet to feel healthy and normal. Yeah. And so that's the main reason I still eat a little bit of fish. But otherwise, I try to not eat much in the way of meat, or I try not to eat because it's not environmentally friendly. At least from what I've read and what I know about it, it's not environmentally friendly. So I'm making all kinds of decisions on a day-to-day basis regarding my lifestyle, that I that take into account my purpose of meaning in life, which is to make the world a better place, not just for future generations, but for this generation.
Right. So your value system has aligned itself with what you view your purpose or meaning is, and then you operate accordingly. Okay.
I like that. That sounds very good.
That's what you said.
You said value system.
Well, so has your purpose or the meaning of your life changed over time, or has it kind of always been this way, would you say? Because sometimes at certain ages, we acquire different meanings, and but
yeah, I'd say it's definitely evolved.
Okay.
And when you're younger, you tend to think in, I hate to say more selfish terms, but more selfish terms.
Yeah.
So,
or at least
being conscious about the environment, that really evolved over time. But even as a kid, I knew it wasn't right to litter. I'd see other people litter and it would kill me, because I knew that was bad. You're littering. It's garbage, but still it evolved over time.
And I do wonder if that's age versus experience. And what I mean by that is, if as a younger child you had been exposed to all kind of, say, environmental factors, or maybe you would have started some of those habits earlier. You know what I mean? You just didn't know. You don't. You're watching Scooby-Doo as a kid. You're not watching the news. You know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway. Speaking of that, if you could give your younger self advice about the purpose of life, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of already there, but
I can't think of anything offhand.
I don't know. I think you kind of covered it.
I think for most people, you see these movies and people can go back in time and see themselves as kids and give themselves advice as kids, and all kinds of fantastical stories like that. And I always think, things turned out all right, didn't they?
Right.
Without that person from the future coming back and telling you what to do, because you're getting advice from other people. You're always, if you're open to input from other people, you're getting that advice anyway. And
I was just gonna say, and also life has a lot of do-overs. Like there's a lot of, you get a lot of, for lack of a better term, grace. If you make mistakes, it's usually not the be-all, end-all of, the world.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a learning experience, and you kind of, anyway.
Right, and one door closes, another opens. We had this conversation previously too, that when something comes to an end that you didn't want to end, usually what happens is another opportunity comes along that you never first saw. And you're glad in a way that the other, whatever you were doing, came to an end, because it led to something that was better, something you may not have even considered if you had stayed in that previous situation.
So you had mentioned that you're not religious, but do you differentiate that between like there being a spiritual element to the purpose of life? Is there a spiritual element, or no for you?
For me, no.
Okay, so no.
But as far as spiritual, and we talk about religious element and whatnot, I don't ascribe to any of the world religions.
Okay.
And
make up your own.
you can. I mean, it's just as good as any of the other ones, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't want to say that the physical universe is all there is. The fact of the matter is that we understand so little about the universe. There's so much more we don't understand. And maybe there is an ultimate purpose. Like I said, I don't think that any of the organized religions has it right. I don't think the Bible was divinely inspired, and et cetera, or the Quran or any other religious work. But there is likely, we know there's a lot more going on than we know, because we've just scratched the surface. Now, is there some intelligence behind it? Who knows?
Right.
But you have to realize that modern science has really only existed for about the last 400 years. If you think about it, in 1600, Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake for advocating that the stars were other suns, and that they may have planets going around them with possibly life forms.
That's a good reason as any to burn a guy. Let's be honest. I'm just kidding.
And then we know what happened to Galileo in the around the 1630s, where he was forced to recant his belief, or his conclusion that Copernicus was right, that the the Earth goes around the sun, not that the sun goes around the Earth. You have to understand that electromagnetism, Newton didn't even publish the Principia until 1687, which was the foundation of physics as we know it. So
Right.
that was less than 400 years ago. And then you have, for instance, the discovery of DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, DNA was discovered, who was it?
Crick and...
No, it was...
Or is that... Yeah.
Well, even before
that was
in
human
the
genome.
1800s.
That was a genome, yeah.
I can't remember the name. Friedrich? Discovered, isolated DNA from a cell.
Yeah.
Didn't really know what it was, but was the first person to isolate DNA, and people gradually learned more and more about it. But it was Watson and Crick in 1953
There we go.
who discovered the double helix of DNA. And since that time, we've been able to gradually decode it and understand it better and better. So electromagnetism, electromagnetism has been, wasn't really understood until James Clerk Maxwell published his equations in, I believe, 1865. So,
right. So you're open to a bunch of new stuff.
Right. So, Einstein came along with relativity theory in the early 1900s, which was around the same time quantum theory was developed.
Only recently cracked the genome. Only recently AI.
Right.
All these things. Right.
We're solving the easy stuff. Can you imagine all the hard stuff that still is to come? So who's to say what we don't understand, what we don't know already?
Okay. I got you. So as a scientist, would you, I mean, it sounds like, not to sound biblical, but you're open to the truth being revealed.
True. Or
right. I mean, basically, so you would say you're what, more agnostic than atheistic, or where do you draw that line?
Like I said, I don't believe in any of the organized religions, but there's more to the universe than we understand.
Right.
Now, whether there's, as I said, whether there's any intelligence behind it, who knows? Maybe we're some grand experiment, or maybe there is
alien ant farm.
Yeah, it could be alien. It could be supernatural. Who knows? But right now, we don't know enough. We don't have enough evidence to make an informed conclusion about the ultimate nature of the universe and where it came from, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you this question because, how do you make peace, especially not being religious, how do you make peace with uncertainty or suffering in relation to life's purpose? In other words, like if the life's purpose is to make things better and do good for other people, there sure is an awful lot of setbacks and suffering and uncertainty out there. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well,
what choice do you have?
Yeah, essentially, what choice do you have? As far as we know, if you don't believe in any supernatural deities, then the universe is cold and what's the word I'm looking for?
Cruel. Chaotic.
It doesn't care about us. Things happen the way they happen without concern for our feelings.
Yeah, I will give you this. That definitely explains disease and infant mortality and cancer and train wrecks. I mean, I'll give you that, for sure.
Indifferent. The universe is indifferent to us.
There you go. That's the word.
That's the word
I was trying to come up with too. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
So, do you have a meaning of life? Did we already discuss this? Like, what is the meaning of life? Have you said?
Well, yeah, it's to make the world a better place. My Star Trek vision, my Star Trek vision.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, exactly. I want to see people. I want to see progress continue. I'd love to see humans eventually develop the ability to travel throughout interstellar space and learn more about the universe, because we live on this one little planet, and one little tiny corner of the universe is a vast universe out there.
Pale blue dot.
Exactly. You're channeling Carl Sagan, one of my idols.
Yeah.
And so my way of helping that was getting involved in education.
You kind of a little bit turn the corner here, but this is great talk on the purpose of life. Do you think, real quick, if you're liking this discussion, please like this, just hit the button, it costs you nothing. And subscribe if you like this. I have a whole new playlist of of just the professor here too that I added. So if you like what we're talking about, you can watch more of him. My question is, do you think it's important to have a purpose in life? Let's just start kind of there.
I can only speak for myself.
Okay, and what do you think?
And for me, absolutely. And I tend to think just in conversation with other people, I think for most people, it is important to have a purpose. And I don't know if everyone, I don't know how many people really consciously think about it a lot. I probably think about it more than a lot of people because I am single. I think for people who have children or otherwise have very, very close or have a family with which they're very, very close. I mean, my only family that's left is basically a bunch of cousins spread throughout the country. I have one aunt who's still alive, but otherwise I just
lone wolf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little bit.
So for someone like me, I think I probably ruminate on it a lot more than most people, because other people are more concerned about day to day, and they know it intuitively. They know I'm doing this for my kids. I can tell you that with my parents. I can tell you the way my parents were. I know that a lot of what drove them was to raise me and my sister, and who's deceased, by the way, just so because I mentioned I just have cousins. My sister passed away unexpectedly back in the 90s.
Wow, sorry, dude.
Thank you. But everything they did was geared towards raising us and making sure that we had a good life going forward.
Right, the purpose was made very specific and very sort of almost put onto them, I guess.
Yeah. Now, granted, they had interests and other things that they liked to do, but so I never spoke to my parents about what they thought their purpose in life was.
It is funny though. You did almost read my notes, because I put on there, I literally put, it's kind of a luxury to contemplate such ideas with any rigor. I put, the single mom with 3 kids and 2 jobs has no time for serious contemplation. She's effectively forced to live in the moment, going from, one action to the next without, so it's almost like a luxury to contemplate such ideas, but at the same time can be very stressful because you're thinking of existential ideas.
And granted, there are a lot of people who are really, really driven, or people who really want to accomplish something. So you can have a family, you can be a single mom with 3 kids and still say, I want to run for Congress.
Just not as easy.
It's going to be a lot harder, sure, because they have all those other obligations. So it's not to say if you have a family, then that's your purpose in life. But what I'm saying is that that's one of your purposes. And then if you have greater ambitions, which a lot of people do, then they will pursue those interests, those ambitions, etc., to achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve.
Do you think that most people even know their purpose?
I don't know. You have to interview more people.
Well, I'll be honest with you.
I think on the street corner and say, "Do you know your purpose in life?"
I may. That's a good idea. It'd be fun. But I'll ask it a different way. But in my own experience, do you think most people really know their purpose? I think that, just my own view, I think that changes, and I think people sometimes think they do. I know, just speaking for my own self, I thought I've known my purpose now 3 or 4 different times. Now I have no idea. The joke that I make to people, because when you start going down this road of thinking, it really can become an existential crisis, an identity crisis, all kinds of things if you don't get it straight. And the thing that's like helped me dramatically was when I said, okay, then I guess my purpose is to find a purpose. And that just kind of took a lot of the load off, because I was like, okay, that means I'm now an explorer, right? And I'll kind of see what's going on. That's for me. So I'm not sure that everybody really knows their purpose. And I also think a lot of people fool themselves to say, this is my purpose, and because they think that's what culturally they're supposed to do, or families telling them what to do. And I don't. So, but I do think the lucky ones certainly do.
And I think there are probably a number of people who really don't think about it very much.
Yeah,
they're content to
go along to get along, do their thing.
Yeah, do their thing. Have raise their family, have their families. They go to work, whether they like their job or they don't like their job. But hey, I like going out on weekends, hanging out with my friends.
Yeah, they're too busy to think about
beer, watching a football game, and they're happy doing that. That's fine if that's what you want.
Yeah, I know. I have some friends of mine. Their purpose would be like to see, their team finally win the Super Bowl, or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's a purpose. It's good. I like it. Let's ask it a different way then, or this way. Can someone live a meaningful life without ever knowing their purpose?
Again, I can't speak for other people, but
I mean,
I would think
you have an
the
opinion on
answer
that?
is, I would think probably yes.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a tough one because it's subject to the word meaningful, right? You define the word meaningful. As if someone, say, went through their whole life not feeling like they had a purpose, but they did a great deal of good or had some good influence on other people that went on to do good,
Or
then
they
you would
just
say that they had a good,
Or they just enjoyed their life.
right, right. There you go, which I think is great.
I can imagine there are probably quite a few people out there who say, I don't think about those things. Who cares? I do what I do. I like what I do, and I'm enjoying my time here on this earth. And maybe they believe in an afterlife, maybe they don't, but they lead fulfilling lives, and they don't really think about it very much.
I think for the same amount of, and there is some substantial amount of people that maybe don't think about it, but I think there's at least an equal amount of people that are struggling to find a purpose.
Oh, sure.
They would like to have a purpose. I mean, there's books all over the place on, finding your purpose, the purpose-driven life. I mean, you go on and on. There's a million books about purpose and finding meaning. What would you say to those who are struggling to find a purpose or to find meaning? Anything? It's a tough question.
Those books.
Read a lot of books.
Read a lot. Well, reading a lot helps.
It does.
I mean, for me personally, I love to read. So maybe that's just me. Basically, it comes down to what you value. So your value system and what you want to accomplish in life, and what would you? And it all goes back to what I said before: making the world a better place.
Yeah, I would say,
and helping other people. I think for most people, if they find something they enjoy doing that will make the world a better place, and usually at the same time that helps other people, then they'll probably find meaning doing that.
Yeah, I think my answer to that is the same answer that I sort of gave earlier, which is, for me anyways, right now, my purpose is to find a purpose. And all kidding aside, it actually helps, because what that basically means is you're trying new things. You're putting yourself into new areas. You're meeting new people. You're doing new things. And if something really resonates and hits you, you'll go with it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's so, I mean, if I was being asked, what would I say about people who are struggling to find a purpose? I would say, take it easy, but keep at it. Keep learning, keep trying new things. And definitely a few books wouldn't hurt either. You had given me a quote earlier that I loved that said, it's not what you have, it's what you do. And I love that quote. What do you mean by that?
Well, we live in a very materialistic society.
Okay.
And so this goes back to minimalism.
Okay.
And of course, we know we live in a consumer-driven society. And I don't think people think about it this way consciously, but you get the impression that a lot of people think they can buy happiness. Oh, if I had that car, that'd be great. Or if I did this or did that, or or not did this, but if I bought this or bought that, and then you have this house full of possessions, and those possessions don't bring that much happiness. Granted, they can bring some happiness, but it's really what you do with your time that determines whether or not you're going to be happy or lead a fulfilling life. If how you spend your time, the things that you do. And
can I give you a counter by the great and wise Weird Al Yankovic? He says, if money can't buy happiness, I guess I'll have to rent it. That's just pretty funny. Anyway, I don't know what that means. I just wanted to get that quote in there. You also gave me a new quote from Dale Carnegie, which I love, and it goes as follows: it isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you are doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It is what you think about. What do you think he means by that?
I think a lot of it has to do with something we were talking about in the previous interview, which is attitude. So what you think about is going to determine your attitude. And if you have a positive attitude towards life, then you're going to be happier. Remember, the last interview was health and happiness, right? So if you have a positive attitude, then you're obviously thinking about things that put you in that positive frame of mind. And that's going to lead to you being happier and probably healthier, and probably by extension leading a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Oh, that's a good summary. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about or add to this about life's purpose? Is there anything else that you got?
I didn't want to touch on religion again.
Okay, let's close with that, because that's always fun and contentious.
I'm hoping maybe you can shed some light on this.
I doubt it.
Earlier you said, well, what a person who's religious how they would respond is blah 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 blah.
Okay.
So you'll think of something similar.
Okay.
So about the afterlife, no one really knows what it entails, if there is any kind of afterlife.
Well, some people purport to really know, but
yes, a lot of people purport to know, but they don't know, as evidenced by the fact that there are as many different opinions as there are people. Because everyone's view is slightly different. But anyway, a lot of people believe that they'll be reunited with loved ones, deceased loved ones, when they pass away.
Yes.
And so the idea is you'll live for eternity with your loved ones, and other people or other spirits or whatever the case may be. And so I want to know, okay, so if that's what paradise is, then what are you going to be doing with those people that's so meaningful? Are you going to be doing things you already did here on earth? Or are you going to be singing, dancing, conversing, having barbecues? And if that's what you're doing in heaven, and you're doing that for eternity, how is that any more meaningful than doing it here on this planet for 50, 60, 70 years? How can it be that we're doing these things now on this planet, but we're told that it's meaningless if it doesn't extend forever? Okay, now we're going to extend it forever so that you're doing this in the afterlife. How is it any more meaningful? And if you think, for example, Jehovah, I do know a little bit about Jehovah's Witnesses, because I knew some people who were Jehovah's Witnesses back years ago. And they actually gave me some literature. Now, granted, this literature is about 40 years old, but their view of the afterlife was that, and if you can see this is reflected in Scripture, they quote a lot from Isaiah, Matthew, Psalms, and the idea is that after Judgment Day and the kingdom of God is established, then this planet will become an earthly paradise. The paradise it was supposed to be before Adam and Eve screwed everything up. That's another conversation we should have sometime. Anyway, so the earth will return to an earthly paradise, and we will all live in this earthly paradise. And the way they describe it is, it's going to be very much like our lives now. You'll be with your loved ones and neighbors and other people. And people are going to be working because we're going to have to grow our food and whatnot. So people are going to be employed. They specifically say there's going to be no poverty. There's going to be no unemployment because everyone's going to be doing something, contributing to society. And of course, the benefit is, the way it's going to differ from this life is that there'll be no disease. There'll be no war. I guess people's personalities are going to change. Can you imagine that? If we're going to be perfect, right? We're admitted into God's kingdom when all is said and done. So no one can lie anymore. No one can say anything. No one can be offensive. There are people who are probably not really bad people, but might do things that, their personality is based upon things that they do that, might not be perfect. So does that mean Uncle Joe, who was obnoxious and offensive and all these other things, his personality is suddenly going to change when because he wasn't bad enough that he's going to be sent to hell. Right. He's a nice guy, but hey, he has a mouth on him and he says things he shouldn't. Does that mean he's going to be a completely different person in heaven? Because God's going to say, no, you can't do that anymore. His wife would probably hope so. No, I would say, by the way, I would just have to say real quick, I don't have an answer to this question that you're posing, by the way, but I have a question. I'm going to answer your question with a question. You mentioned earlier about the spousal situation when you go in there. I was just thinking, this is one thing I always wondered, if I say I'm married and my first wife was just absolutely horrible, just a terrible person. Yeah, hold on, I get a divorce because she's so abusive physically, emotionally, or whatever, and then I get remarried, and that spouse passes away prematurely, say a car accident, and now I'm on my third wife, and then we all perish.
Like, what's the living situation?
Right. Yeah.
That's a question for you. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I don't either. That's
Okay.
that's another question I have.
All right.
But the thing is, that like I said, that's the view of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that the earth will become an earthly paradise. No, we're all going to live forever. People who, when they died, if they were old, they'll be rejuvenated, so they'll be in the prime of their life. And we're going to basically live lives similar to the ones we have now. And by the way, in their illustrations, all the men wear suit and ties, and all the women wear dresses. But anyway, the paraphernalia they gave me had lots of pictures. But anyway, it looks very much like the life we have now, except without the suffering and the disease and things of that nature, war, poverty, all those things have been eradicated, and it's going to extend forever.
Yeah.
So if what we're doing on this planet right now is meaningless, if our lives are temporary, and you're saying, well, it's temporary, so it's meaningless, so then how is it any more meaningful if you're doing it forever? Then, as you said earlier, you would think it's more meaningful if it's temporary, because you know it's not going to last forever. You have to squeeze every little bit of
squeeze all the juice out before it runs out.
You possibly can. So to me, it doesn't make sense.
Interesting. And by the way, I have tried to interview Jehovah's Witnesses now twice when they're out handing their pamphlets. I've been declined. They've told me to call the main office or get a hold of the main office, which I have not done yet. But I would love to interview them sometime, just to kind of get the, see what you've said.
Right.
I'd like to see that, witness that for myself for sure.
Right. And the other thing is, well, going back to William Lane Craig, I'm trying to get all this in. I told you I was going to hijack this interview.
It's considered hijacked.
So
go ahead.
William Lane Craig, he said I read some of his stuff, and like I said, I like to watch a lot of these debates where he's debating other people. And he has said that the purpose of our existence is to know and love God. And extrapolating from that, not extrapolating, but something that you'll hear other people say as far as what eternal life will be like, is that it'll be eternal bliss because we'll be in the presence of God. So I want to know, okay, I'm going to be in eternal bliss for eternity. What does that mean? To me, it sounds like some kind of perpetual drug-induced high.
What's wrong with that? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, but that's what it sounds like. What does that mean? So that's why I said if our lives don't have purpose and meaning, and it only has meaning if God exists, then I want to know, what projects is God working on that I'm going to be able to participate in, and what's so great about them?
What do you think about?
Or if it's going to be this eternal bliss, then what's so attractive about that, just being on this perpetual high?
Can I ask you this question?
Or if it's being with your family and friends and whatnot, and living forever, how is that any more meaningful than our existence right here?
Can I ask you this question? Because a lot of the some of the New Age thinking, or I use New Age in quotes, and some like an Oprah version of what you just said, the purpose of life is to know and love God. If you were to replace the word God with universe, what does that do for you? To know the universe and to love the universe.
Well,
do you know what I mean? I'm just saying, because you hear that a lot, where people will say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And then anytime they hear the word God, they'll interchange it with, say, the universe or nature, or what do you think about that?
Well, it's kind of like what a scientist does. Scientist is, for instance, my background's astrophysics. So, to know and love.
Is that the study of the Jetsons? Just kidding.
You're looking for it.
I'm sorry.
Wise guy.
Just kidding. Anyway.
Yeah, as an astronomer or an astrophysicist, I could say I kind of fall into that camp, because that's how I've found meaning in life, is just the majesty of the universe and trying to understand it better. Knowing and understanding God, you could say that's pretty similar to knowing and understanding the universe. The difference that I see is that by saying knowing and understanding God, and again, in this case, we're not talking specifically about the Judeo-Christian God.
You're just
talking about whatever, if generic, supernatural intellect created this universe. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I feel like I've got a convert here. No, I'm just kidding. Is there anything else you wanted to say on this subject before we
No, I think
turn this off?
I think I hijacked it enough.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you appreciated the hijacking, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.